Hello train fans, welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's early April 2020 and I probably don't need to explain this. Hopefully this video ages well and you're watching this years from the year 2020. We are currently in the middle of a global pandemic called coronavirus, and it's really caused a lot of people to be cooped up. Me, not so much. My job has been turned upside down, working a lot of hours, a lot of extra hours, but I still find a little bit of time here to work on trains. Wanted to get this video out for those of you who don't have the ability to get out and you're sort of quarantining yourself. Now's a great time to work on trains and, you know, get some of those projects done. You might not ordinarily have time to do it. That's why I bring you to this video. I'm gonna show you one of the projects I've actually been working on. If you've been on my YouTube channel, you know that in early spring 2020, Walthers produced 4 GP9s, 2 high hood units, 2 chop nose units, Illinois Central orange and white, and they're the mainline versions, so they do not have any of the separately applied details that you're going to find on a higher end Proto or an Athearn Genesis model. So this video, start to finish, I'm going to show you what I'm going to do to super detail these locomotives. I have 4 of them. I've actually already done one. I wanted to do one first to make sure that everything worked out properly. Then I knew I had 3 more, so I'm going to go ahead and make a video of how I did this. I'm going to show you all the parts and pieces. You can take a look at the video description for a complete list of all of the parts and pieces I used. I try to put part numbers on there where I purchased them from, and I'll just walk you through how I detailed this locomotive. So I'm only going to give you a teaser. Here's the nose view of one of the high hood GP9s that I've already tricked out. You can see that there's just a lot of details on here. At the end of the video I'll go ahead and show you through everything that I've done, but you can kind of already see here we got a coupler cut lever, all of the MU hoses, drop step, MU receptacle, all of the grabs, nose mounted bell, some of the grab irons, windshield wipers, sunshades. On the side there's wind deflectors, the lift pins, added some decals, which is prototypically correct for Illinois Central. So this is what I've done on this particular unit, and I'll give you more in-depth close-ups and really highlight the details of everything I did as we walk through the video. And here's just a side-by-side comparison. I'm going to start with 9174 here. This is going to be the locomotive that I super detail. Again, you can see it's pretty blank, pretty basic on the front here. There's no separately applied details. Basically we have the handrail stanchions, the coupler, there is a footboard underneath here, and you know, everything else is going to be added on as we go through the video. Okay, I'm going to quickly run through the parts and just sort of show you, give you some close-ups here of what we're using. So first and foremost, you can get this straight from Walthers. This is the diesel detail kit for the EMD GP9 locomotives. The same kit for both the high hood and the chop nose versions. It sends enough grabs to do either unit. Next thing, again, you can take a look at the parts list in the video description. Here are the coupler cut levers. Here are, for the chop nose units, we have the bell is actually mounted on the high hood. For the chop nose, or for the high hood versions, actually found these are the Athearn nose mount bells, so that goes on the high hood units, so you have to get one of each depending upon, or you have to get the prototypically correct one. Here are the Canton antennas. Just real quick about these Canton antennas, they do have a little bit of an extra molding piece on it. You have to cut it off, so you can see right there by the edge of my thumb that that's where the actual Canton antenna is. It's kind of nice because it makes these a lot easier to paint. Walthers did not mount the horn on the chop nose versions prototypically correct. It's actually offset to the right of the roof line, and then which will work out pretty well because I'll just remove the antenna here, put the can antenna where the hole is for the horn, and we should be good to go. Here are the MU hoses. Again, have to paint these all up. Just pay attention. There are a couple different versions of these Detailed West MU hoses. You're going to want to get the MU 265s. I got the other ones. I think they're like 295s. They're way too long, so you need these to be able to fit, and they're still on the verge of being almost a little bit too long. Air hose set. Need one of those. Diesel drop. Diesel drop step. This is the drop step for the nose and the tail of the unit. And then we also have the MU receptacles. So most of those are Detailed West parts. Pretty much all of that I've gotten off of eBay. I got these little tricks off eBay too. KV models here are the Sunshades. You can see I've already painted these up since I did the first locomotive. Had these all set out ready to go, so I painted them up. Again, KV. These are windshield wipers. Nice thing is there's enough on one of these where you can basically do a chop nose version and the high hood version. And then I also got, again, KV models. These are prototypically correct ICG sunshades, or not sunshades, wind deflectors. And what makes these unique, and this is unique if you see some of the prototype photos, you can see the edge on these has a little bit of an angle to it instead of just being a straight rectangle like you're going to find on a lot of different locomotives. And then finally, if you notice the front handrail, front and rear handrail on these models doesn't have the chain for the walkway to drop down, so I actually have just an HO scale log chain that I'm going to replace the middle stanchion on the handrail. So those are the parts and pieces that you need to detail these out. A couple things you probably noticed that I haven't gotten yet, mostly because I haven't found anything that's prototypically correct. Don't have speed recorders for the trucks yet. And then the other thing that I don't have is any of the sanding lines. I cannot find sanding lines yet that will work for the early version GP units. I did find some for some current model SD70s and things of that nature that just wouldn't work for the size of the trucks. They were basically made for 3-axle trucks instead of the 2-axle trucks. So I'm still looking for those. So not quite done yet. I'd like to be able to find the sanding hatches. Another thing that I haven't found, and it's not huge because if you look at some of the prototype photos, I haven't been able to find prototypically correct spark arresters yet for any of these units, and I'm still on the hunt for some of those. So those are the parts and pieces, even not having the speed recorder, the sanding hoses, and some of the spark arresters. Still very satisfied with how the first high hood version that I set up. Additionally, you're going to need some tools, paint, tweezers, glue, etc. And take a look at the parts list, and I kind of show you, as we trick this locomotive out, I'll show you the tools and the parts and pieces I use to get this accomplished. So we are now officially ready to start with the detailing of 9174. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the shell off the locomotive. You don't necessarily have to, but I find it's going to be a little bit easier to work on the shell, adding the parts and drilling the holes out when you don't have the weight of the frame and the motor and everything. You need the couplers off anyway. So pretty simple to pop the shell off. A screw holding the front and rear coupler boxes on. Get these pulled out. This one's a little tight. And we're going to go ahead and set these aside here in a minute. Got that coupler, the rear coupler box off. I got just a little bit of a smaller screwdriver here. There are 2 screws holding the gas can and air compressors on. We're just going to gently take these off. You'll notice, and this is just some of my advice, I think it's advisable to work on a white or light colored surface. A lot of these parts and pieces are very small, so you're just going to want to be extra careful not to lose anything. Just the way my eyesight is, it's easier for me. Most of the screws and the components we're going to put on here are either black or gray, so you get a good contrast with the white paper. So couplers are out. These are the two screws that we're holding the shell on, so let's go ahead and get the frame off, or the shell off the frame. There we go. So here's what the chop nose unit looks like with the shell off. So you notice we got a lot of parts and pieces floating around here. It's going to take a few days to get this put back together, so I'm just going to go ahead and actually reattach the screws. So these two screws were holding the shell on the frame, so I'm just going to go ahead and gently put these back in here so we know where they're at. I'm actually going to put the couplers back on the locomotive frame, and I'm going to put the frame in the box. Okay, so I put the couplers back on. You can see the front and rear couplers. Put the gas can or the gas tank back on. Put the screws back in the shell. So every single screw, every single part and piece is accounted for. You don't have to do this, but I'm getting old and forgetful, and I don't remember what screw goes where. So I'm gonna have the shell off for probably the better part of 2 or 3 days doing the work that I need to do on it. So this just sort of safeguards to make sure that you don't remember where all the screws and everything go. So I'm going to go ahead and put this back in the box. I'm going to get the styrofoam protectors to put in between the handrails and the long hood. Okay, so I got the frame back in the box, and I'm going to put these styrofoam protectors in here to keep the handrails secure or safe during this process. Okay, so we're good to go. We're going to set the shell off to the side, and I'm going to put the frame back in my storage cabinet, and we'll keep it until the end. So I got my workbench out, and my favorite workbench, to be honest with you. It's actually an old cutting board, but it's gotten a lot of use for me. I got this, and I would highly recommend this. Just a piece of styrofoam. It's pretty soft styrofoam, because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open up, I've got all the parts and pieces here. I'm going to open everything up, and I'm actually going to start gently putting the parts and pieces in the styrofoam, because we're going to get everything painted up before we actually apply it to the locomotive. So I'm going to go ahead and start opening up these packages and get everything placed on the styrofoam for painting. So you can see how I have this arranged is all the parts and pieces that need to be orange I have on the left side. All the parts that I need to paint white are going to be on the right side. The MU hoses, those are just sort of my dividing line. I did open up the coupler, cut levers, the bell, obviously the MU hoses. I wanted to wait and show you this on video. All the parts that come with the diesel detail kit from Walthers. Here are these staples. Okay, the nice thing about these is they are very well packaged. You have a single package with all of the lift rings. Here's a single package. Here is a straight grab iron. It actually goes behind the cab door on the engineer side. Here are all the grab irons, the bent grab irons. Here are the grab irons for the front and rear of the locomotive. and then obviously we have a set of instructions. Get a good shot of that for you if you're interested. And then here is what the other side says. Feel free to pause the video. Give you a chance to take a look and see what these say. It is important to read the instructions from a couple different standpoints. Number one, it tells you the size of drill bits you need to use to drill out the holes to put the grabs and the lift rings on. It's a size 80 drill bit. So I'm going to go ahead and carefully open these packages up and get everything laid out here on the styrofoam so I can get it painted. Okay, the last thing I'm going to do, I need to count up how many orange grabs I need and how many white grabs I need. So I'm going to put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 orange on the front, 6, 7 orange on the back, and we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 whites. So 7 orange, 4 white of the grabs. Still have them in this package here. Just going to show you a little trick. These things are very hard to handle. So I've got just a very fine pair of needle nose pliers, and this is just a very long, arduous process of fishing out the grab from the plastic bag, and then just very carefully putting it into the styrofoam for painting without actually losing it. I've had a few of these go flying. It's not a lot of fun to try to find them. Again, that's why I try to work on a white background and just a nice clean surface, because you don't want these things to go flying and get lost. So I'm gonna go ahead and get these grabs on the styrofoam, then we'll be ready to paint. Okay, so I've got all the parts and pieces on the styrofoam. I'm gonna set these aside. I have 2 of the grab irons left. Again, this kit is for both the high hood and the chop nose version. So there's a couple, 2 less. Because the hood doesn't go all the way to the top, there's 2 less grab irons that go on the nose of this locomotive compared to the high hood unit. So I'm going to save these. They do send an ample amount of lift rings. I actually have 2 more than what I need ready to paint. There's still about another 6 or 8 in here. Again, the high hood unit takes a few more of these because you put some of the lift rings actually on the short hood. But the rest of it, I'm going to save these. And we're going to go ahead and get all these parts and pieces painted up. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started on the paint here. I'm going to start with the orange grabs. Ordered this off eBay. It's Illinois Central Orange from Badger Precise Model water-based acrylic paint. I will say for the Walthers paint, this matches very, very well. I've already done one of my high hood units. You can kind of see the orange. To me, it's prototypically correct Illinois Central Orange. So I have a very, very fine bristle brush here that I'm just going to go ahead and start. This is just a long, slow, arduous process. Just have to take your time, be patient. We're gonna have to put multiple coats on. I do have some primer, and on the high hood unit I ended up priming some of the grabs and then not priming some of them, and I didn't have any better success priming versus not priming. So takes a few coats to really get the paint to stick. So again, you just take your time and paint them up. So you don't need to sit and watch me paint all of these individually. So I'm going to pause the video and I'll be back here once I get the orange paint on. I know it doesn't show real well, but I did get the first coat of orange on. You know, again, we're going to do this several times, so you know the first couple coats are always going to look a little questionable. The good news is this paint does dry pretty quickly, so we'll let this go, let it sit a couple hours. I'll come back, hit it again, let it sit overnight, hit it in the morning, and then usually about the third or fourth coat it's getting pretty good. But then even after you apply to the locomotive, you'll still have to do some touch-up. So just be patient. It's not a perfect process, but you know, the more time you invest in it, the better off it's going to look. I'm going to go ahead and clean my brush up, and I'll be back and we'll get the white grabs and lift rings painted up next. So for the white, I have this Model Master, just flat white paint. Actually got this at Hobby Lobby, but this is also a water-based paint. Again, probably would go on a little bit easier with an airbrush, but for these small grabs, I'm choosing to hand paint rather than do the airbrush. So again, we're just gonna go consistently. Take your time. Just make sure you get all the surfaces painted white. And just like the orange, we'll go ahead and do multiple coats on here. So I'm gonna pause the video here and I'll come back once I get the white finished up. Okay, so I got the white finished up. For the MU hoses and the air hose, I have just, this is Testors model paint. Flat black and flat steel. Get these opened up here. I always have a supply of toothpicks on hand to mix these bottles up there. They have a tendency to separate pretty good when they sit for a long period of time. So it's always good to just have your supply here, and then I've just got a piece of wax paper I'm gonna drop the toothpick on. Slide this over so we get the MU hoses. Nice thing about these MU hoses and the air hoses especially, there's the mold mark that is attached to the hose, so it just gives you a little bit something to hang on to. You don't have to actually fight the product itself. We're gonna paint the ends silver. Sorry, I don't know how well this is showing up on the video. It's a small product, a small part. I have two hands full and I can't really tell if the video is in focus or not. So I'm going to set that off to the side. Get this one painted up. Again, since these are such small surfaces, the key is small amounts of paint. You don't need big globs, because otherwise you're going to end up with a pretty significant run on the hose. So we're just gonna make sure all the sides are covered. Again, we'll hit these MU hoses. This is the part of modeling that I love. And typically I have a little bit harder time doing it knowing that the camera's on, trying to work around the camera. But the precision, taking your time, doing it properly, it's a good feeling when you get it right. So I'm going to pause the camera. I'm going to keep painting these hoses up. I got to get the back side and the other set. I'll come back and we'll put the silver tips on. So to drill the holes, you're going to want a pin vise, and then you're also going to want to make sure that you have the correct size bits. You can see here these are sized 61 to 80. The smaller the number, the larger the bit size. So 61 is the largest, 80 is the smallest. So we'll go ahead and pop these open. You can just see on the very back side here, the smallest bit is this number 80 right here. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this out and get it installed into the vise pin. Again, I know it's pretty hard to focus, but you can see very small bit in the pin here. I have the bit pushed flush back with the edge of the, or with the end of the vise, so that way the bit should stay fairly normal. Like I said, for these top lift ring holes, they're already pre-scored, so those drill out very, very easily. And again, with the pin we just made, these are scored, so we're going to drill those out here in a minute. My approach to this was, I know I need to take the front stanchion off, or the front handrails, to get to these without breaking it. I also know that I have to put the coupler cup levers on, and I need to use where these stanchion holes are to make sure that I get the bolts for the cut lever to be in the right location. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the camera off here because I need to get up and close and personal with this, but I'm going to drill 4 holes, 2 on each side, or basically 1 on each side of the handrail stanchions. Once I get that done, I'll pull the front of this off and we'll go ahead and start drilling out the rest of the holes. So there you can see there are the 4 holes I drilled out. There's actually 2 more holes up here that I'm going to drill out for the long hang bar, that, or the long grab bar that goes across the front. Those are actually already pretty much pre-scored, so those are pretty easy to drill out. So now we're going to carefully detach front handrail stanchions. From my vantage point, I don't believe these are glued in. They do have a pretty good fit, but I don't believe that they're glued in. So you just have to be very careful, very gentle. We don't want to break these. And there we go. So again, I'm gonna start scoring these, and we're gonna drill them out. One of the things you just have to be cognizant of when you're doing this, take your time. You don't want to mess up. You want them to look right. So just take your time. If the bit's fighting you, stop, start over, do it again. So make sure we got that in the score mark. Another thing you just have to be careful of, and be cognizant of, is just making sure, double check, make sure that's right. It is. When you drill these out, just be patient. Don't fight it, don't force it. It's a long process. It's not like using a power drill where you get instantaneous results. You can see there's that drill hole right there. So I'm going to stop the video. I have to drill all of these out. 2 up here on top of the short hood, these 2 over here. Have all of these lift ring holes to drill out. These on the back. All of the grabs for the back. There's a side handrail that goes right here with these 2 bolt marks. I got to drill out the back for the cut lever. Then I need to drill out for the sunshades. I need to drill out for the wind shades, wind flaps, wind breakers, whatever you want to call them. Need to drill out a hole on top for the horn, and I think that's it. So this is a long, painstaking process. It's probably going to take me a day or 2 to get all these drilled out, because I'm going to take my time and do it right. So I'll check back in periodically through it, but that's just what I'm going to do. I'm going to score, drill, score, drill, score, drill. Okay. be back in a little bit. Okay everyone, I'm back. I'm going to show you where I drilled out all the holes. So on the top of the locomotive there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 drill points for the lift rings. This was the original hole for the horn. I re-drilled that over here. 2 grabs over here on the tail end of the long hood. On this side I drilled 2 holes for the sunshade, 2 holes for the wind deflector, 1 hole for the bell. On the front of the locomotive, 4 holes for the rings for the coupler grabs, 2 holes for the MU hose, 1 hole for the train hose. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 drill points for grabs on the short hood, 1 here on the fireman's side of the locomotive, 2 holes just above the cab doors for windshield wipers. On the engineer side, there's 2 holes here for a grab just behind the rear door leaving the cab. And then on the back, similar, there's 4 holes for the cut lever, 1 hole each for the MU hose cluster, and then 1 hole for the air hose. And then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 drill sets for the grabs. So we are officially ready to go to start applying parts to this locomotive. So I'm going to do this in stages here because we want to give the opportunity for the parts and pieces to dry. I just use some plain Testors clear part cement. This dries pretty well. I've got a piece of wax paper down. I'm just going to put a nice little pond of glue on my wax paper. And another critical piece for this, you need a good precise pair of tweezers. Because this is pretty precise, I'm not sure how many of these I'll actually do. I'll do 1 or 2 to demonstrate, and then I'll do the rest off camera because it's kind of awkward trying to apply these on camera. So I've got one of the orange cut levers, and again, I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this on camera. So I've got it on my needle nose. I'm just going to dab each end of the grab into a glob of glue. And then we'll go ahead and carefully apply these to the holes that we drilled out. Patience is a virtue. Don't get frustrated. It's very easy to get frustrated. Another thing, don't worry about. You will screw the paint up on your grabs. It's inevitable. Get a good tight shot of that there. So once I get these applied, I'm going to do a quick touch up on all the grabs. So I'm just going to start applying. I'm going to shut the video off here for a little bit. I'm going to apply several of these, bring them back, and I'll show you the finished product. Okay, so I got the front grabs on. And I'm going to go ahead and get the rears on. 2 orange and then 4 white. So here you can see the rear of the locomotive. Got those grabs on. So total there are 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 11 grabs that I just put on. Total time to install them right out about 10-15 minutes. So again, take your time. I am going to let these set up before I do anything else. Let the glue dry in case I bump them putting any of the other parts on, and then I'm going to touch up paint them. But overall those went on really well, really smooth, and let these set up and we'll continue to add parts and pieces. Okay, I got the front and rear grabs on. Give you a good close-up here. Got them all spec'd up, painted up. Got the rears on here as well. So the next thing I'm going to do, we're going to put the top lift rings on today, and we're also going to get the front and rear prepped. I have these Illinois Central Always Be Careful decals, and if you see any of the locomotives prototypically, they are on the front. They'll be in between the front stanchions, just above the cut lever. So these are just standard decals. They're so small I just dropped one. Well, it's probably not going to focus on this here, but it's just Illinois Central Always Be Careful. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this in some water here, let it sit and soak for a few minutes. Not a few minutes, about 30 to 45 seconds. I have some of this Decal Set Solution. So I'm just going to paint just a dab of this on where we're going to put the decals. It just helps make sure that they stay nice and secure. I'm going to get these on, because once I get the top lift rings on, we're ready to reinstall the front grabs, and we're also going to, reinstall the handrail stanchions, and then we'll install everything on the front of the locomotive, front and rear, the cut levers. Okay, so I'm just going to gently slide this off here. There it goes. Zoom in a little bit for you here. And of course it's upside down, which it's easy to turn when the decal's still wet. This thing is so small I actually had to zoom in with the camera to see. My eyes are not the greatest. There we go. So my visual points here, really trying to get it pretty centered between these two stanchion holes right there. So, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get the other one on, and then we'll be ready to install the lifts. Okay, got those installed front and rear. So we're gonna go ahead and start installing the lift rings. So just like the front and rear grabs, again, we've pre-drilled all these holes out. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of these lift pins to put on. So I have them over here on my styrofoam. So I'm gonna dab them in my glue solution. These actually go pretty quick because you only have one hole to the grabs are a little bit tougher because you have to put it in the pin in 2 different holes. This one with these lift rings, you just have one, so you don't have to get them as quite as lined up as what you do with the grabs. Again, patience is virtue here. So there's one. I'll do one more here and then I'll shut the camera off so I don't bore you guys to death. There's 2. So I got those 2 in. So let me get the last 6 in and we'll keep moving. Okay, so you can see I got all the lift rings in. And just because we're gonna let the glue set up here, I'm gonna do 2 more things. I'm going to go ahead and put the dome antenna on, and I'm going to reinstall the horn And I'm going to sit and let this dry till tomorrow, and then we'll tackle the front and rear. Okay, since the last clip, there's a few things that I've added, and I apologize for not getting them on film. I accidentally didn't have the microphone plugged in all the way, so I shot a bunch of video with no sound. It just didn't work real well with my video, so I apologize for that. So you can see I got the front and rear handrail stanchions back on. Removed that center section, added a chain. I also ended up adding the wind deflectors, got the horn on, added the Canton antenna up on top. Let's see if I can get a little bit better light on it here. I added all of the windshield wipers, and then I also got the bell added. So again, I apologize for that. A little bit of technical issue on my part. So now we're going to go ahead and keep working on the front and rear of the locomotive. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put, there's a long grab that goes all the way across the front of the locomotive. So we're going to get those installed front and rear, and then we'll start working on the couple of release handles. So here's the bar that I'm going to put across the front of the locomotive. Again, I just have a little pond of my modeling cement over here. I'm dabbing the corners in the modeling cement. We're just going to carefully get these to attach. You have to be careful when you're doing this particular bar. You just want to be careful about the decals that we put on. There we go. There we go. And we just got that bar on right there. So I'm going to go ahead and get the rear one on as well, and then we'll start working on the cut levers. So you can see I got my styrofoam back out here. These cut levers actually come with 8 rings. This one, I don't know if it was just oversight or an accident. This actually had 9 mount rings associated with it. We only need 8. So I'm going to take one of these at a time. Again, you just have to be careful and patient. I'm going to go ahead, and just for time essence, I'm going to show you one, and I'm going to put the remainders on. Basically, you just have to carefully thread each one of these rings through you have to thread them through the edge of the cut lever and to get them into place. So I really need to focus and concentrate on this. I'm going to shut the video off and get these installed, and then I'll show you how we mount them on a locomotive. Okay, so I got the 4 rings on the cut lever. So I'm going to go ahead and dip all 4 of these in my glue, and then I'm going to go ahead and mount them. You can tell I pre-drilled these 4 holes right across here, the front, just below the handrail stanchions. So again, this is pretty delicate work, so I need all of my space here, so I'm going to shut the camera off and move it, and then I'll show you once I get this installed. So after a solid 5 or 6 minutes, these things are just, you're trying to line 4 pins up, but you can see I got them 1, 2, 3, 4. Got the cut lever installed. So what I'm going to do is, once I get my paint back out, I'm actually going to touch up the handles on either side of the locomotive steps. I'm going to paint them white to match the handrail stanchions. So I'm going to go ahead and get the rear installed, and then we're going to go ahead and move forward with the MU hoses and the air hose. Okay, so the cut levers have dried, and you can see that I actually applied a little coat of white paint to the handles. Now we're ready to go ahead and start and put the MU hoses on and the main train air hose on. When you take a look at the MU hoses, the mold actually has a left and right, so you want to make sure that you're getting the proper MU hoses on the correct side. So if you want to take a look at this here, I'm not sure how well you'll be able to see it. The first hose is actually a little bit longer. That needs to be on the inside closest to the coupler, so this is the right side MU hose, and this is the left side MU hose. And then we have our air hose. So again, I'm just going to dab just a teeny tiny bit of glue. Okay, similar, we're just going to take the MU hose, dab it in a little bit of glue. Sorry about that, I had to turn the camera off. I just could not get the MU hoses applied, trying to fight with the camera in front of me. So that's what they look like. You see MU hoses and the train air hose. So I'm going to go ahead and get the rears installed as well. So we got the MU hoses attached. The last thing I'm going to do here to let this set up, and we're almost done with this locomotive, is I'm going to add the sunshades. Again, those are already pre-drilled out for me, so just going to take one for each side, there's a little tab that I'm going to get some glue on here. And again, we pre-drilled these out so they just fit. Right in the holes we pre-drilled. Let these dry, and then I'm going to bend them into place once they're dry. So here's what the sunshades look like. Again, I'll get those a little bit more bent into place once the locomotive dries up. So it's a good place to stop for right now. Let all of this stuff dry up. Really the last thing we're going to add in this locomotive will be all done. Drop step and then an MU receptacle. We're going to add those on the front and rear. So once these get dried up, I'll be back. We'll get those added and we'll be good to go. Okay, so since the last video, I went ahead and I added the drop step and I added the MU receptacle. And I also put it back on the frame and got the couplers and everything back on. So this locomotive is finished and it's ready to go. I'm going to bring in one of my other chop nose GP9s that I haven't super detailed yet, and I'll just sort of give you a side-by-side comparison, and then we'll do a close-up of all the parts and pieces we added. So here are the two locomotives side by side. Again, just from the front, this locomotive here on your right, screen right, is Walthers Mainline chop nose GP9. That comes out of the package, and then the one on the left is the one I just super detailed. You can see how tremendously different they look just by adding the parts and pieces that I added. Okay, to recap everything we did: added the dome antenna, moved the horn, added grab irons to the front, added a chain to the handrail stanchions, added MU hoses, added an MU receptacle, added a drop step, added a Cutler cup lever, touched up some of the paint, added sunshades, added windshield wipers. Take a look at the engineer side of the locomotive. Added a grab iron behind the engineer's door. Added all the lift rings on top of the locomotive. Again, on the rear, same thing. MU receptacle, MU hoses, air hose, drop step, grabs on the fireman's side. Added a bell to the long hood, sunshades, wind deflectors, everything. So I'm done. I know this is a long video. I apologize for the length of it, but super detailing a locomotive is a lot of work. But if you pay attention to the details, take your time, you can take a locomotive and make it look prototypically correct. So thank you for watching this video. If you have any questions, please comment.